Welcome to today's Explainer. I am so glad you're here because today we are tackling something that literally affects every single one of us. We're going to decipher a really fascinating text that shows us how to instantly transform our family dynamics. Okay, let's jump right in. The source material we're looking at today presents this profound, almost mind-bending concept that your family is essentially a mirror reflecting your own inner self. By the end of this explainer, you are going to have a completely new framework for understanding the people closest to you.
But first, let's start with a really universal question. Why are family problems so incredibly hard to solve? I mean, it's a frustrating truth, right? The people we share our lives with, they're often the hardest ones to deal with. We can be perfectly polite and patient with some total stranger at the grocery store, but the second we walk through our own front door, bam, friction sparks. Today's text asks us to look at exactly why that happens, and more importantly, how we can actually break the cycle. And, well, that brings us straight to the author's core thesis. The shortest path to having others treat you kindly is to first become a kinder person yourself. Now, notice how this completely flips our usual script. Usually, when we have a conflict with a spouse or a parent, our gut instinct is to try and force them to change. But the text argues that's basically impossible. The absolute only variable you actually control in your household is you.
To really get this, we need to define the central metaphor of this explainer, the mirror rule. The text defines this as the psychological and spiritual principle that your family simply reflects your own inner state. Think about it. Human beings react to what they're given. If you come at someone with thorns, well, their own thorns are going to come right out. So when you're interacting with a difficult family member, they're really just a mirror, bouncing your own energy, your own expectations, and your own attitudes right back at you. All right, let's dive into our first application of this, the spousal reflection. Look at this transformation here. On one side, we have idealistic newlyweds. You know, when a couple first gets together, they've got high hopes, they speak to each other kindly, they see the absolute best in each other. But as the years, maybe 10, 20 years roll by, we often see this slow shift into tired, complaining spouses. The text describes this all too common scenario where the once gentle partner is just exhausted from work, or that sweet newlywed turns into someone constantly airing grievances. The daily grind has literally tarnished that original shiny mirror. Which leads us to a pretty tough but honestly empowering realization. If your partner looks worse than before, you share the responsibility for that change. Wow. So the key takeaway here is self-accountability. The source firmly reminds us that spouses are constantly educating and influencing each other every single day. If you look at your partner right now and think they look miserable or tired or bitter compared to when you first met, well, you kind of helped co-create that environment. You share the responsibility for their current state. But hey, don't worry, the text definitely doesn't just leave us hanging there. It gives us clear, actionable steps to polish that mirror and fix the reflection. Step 1, reflect on your initial vows. Remember why you actually fell in love with them in the first place. Step 2 is absolutely critical. Stop finding faults. The author actually notes that criticizing someone is often just a disguised way of bragging about your own abilities. Crazy, right? And step 3 is to elevate each other. Couples have to proactively find each other's good qualities. When you start projecting appreciation, your spouse's mirror is eventually going to reflect that exact appreciation right back at you. Moving right along, let's look at parent-child soul wavelengths. The text introduces this wildly fascinating concept called soul affinity. This is the principle that a child's soul doesn't just, randomly drop into a family. Instead, it typically chooses and is born to parents who share a similar spiritual wavelength or frequency. The author states that for over 80% of people, a soul literally cannot be born to parents unless there's this underlying affinity. So our kids aren't just biologically similar to us, they are spiritually resonant with us. They reflect our deepest and sometimes completely hidden spiritual tendencies. Notice how this timeline maps out the distortion. The text points out that unhealed emotional wounds from childhood, say a lack of affection from a mother or deep frustration from never getting a father's approval, they don't just magically disappear. Actually, they manifest years later in totally different forms. A person might spend their early adulthood desperately seeking validation from their bosses at work. And in later adulthood, this can lead to repeated setbacks in marriages, where they subconsciously seek out partners who replicate that exact original childhood wound. The mirror just keeps reflecting the unresolved pain over and over until we finally fix it. Okay, so we've looked at spouses and we've explored parents and children. But what happens when the family mirror is reflecting pure, unfiltered conflict? Specifically, what happens when we look at the notoriously difficult dynamic between, say, a mother in law and a daughter in law? The source tackles this head on with a total paradigm shifting concept: in law conflict as training. Instead of seeing friction with in laws as this endless toxic drama that you just have to grit your teeth and endure, which, let's be honest, is how most of us naturally view it, the text urges us to reframe it. View it as purposeful, spiritual training. Think of it like this: the mother in law often criticizes or points out flaws simply because she has vastly more life experience. And sure, being on the receiving end of that might feel exactly like being a new employee getting scolded by the boss. But taking this gracefully, that is presented as excellent spiritual training, perfectly designed for your own growth in the real world. To not just survive, but actually thrive in the spiritual training, the text offers this golden rule. If you associate with their strengths, there are no bad people. So the crucial point is this: your mother-in-law, your father-in-law, whoever is causing the friction, they have positive traits, for sure. By focusing entirely on what you can learn from them and actively acknowledging those strengths, the conflict literally diffuses. The mirror stops reflecting hostility and starts reflecting mutual respect. As we bring this explainer to a close, we hit our final core concept: be kinder first. So, how do we actually put all this into practice? First, acknowledge your reflection. Look at your family and realize they're showing you a piece of yourself. Second, stop blaming others. Remember, you cannot force their minds to change, but you have 100% control over your own mind. Third, actively change your projection. If you want a harmonious house, you've got to emit harmony. And finally, lead with kindness. Changing your own mindset is absolutely the shortest path to solving household friction. Which leaves us with this final vital thought to chew on. If your family is indeed a mirror, what are you going to choose to reflect today? The people around you are just waiting to bounce your energy right back at you. You have the power to instantly change the dynamic in your home just by changing yourself. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope you take these insights and use them to see a brilliant new reflection in your own life.